Yeah, so I was just going to do a deployment of the StashCache application. So actually, I'm going to do StashCache, which is just OSG's packaging of StashCache. So I'm here in the SLATE portal, which is just sort of our web interface that's built on top of the SLATE API. And I'm in sort of our application catalog here. Maybe I'll back this out. And you can see that there's a number of applications that we have sort of in our stable catalog. A lot of these should be pretty familiar to you. We have the Condor Worker, we have Globus, we have GridFTP, we have Squid, the hosted CE, Perf and importantly, StashCache. Some of these for my demo here. You click on that application, you can see that in the portal we have like a README that says, oh, this is how you do this deployment. This is all the stuff that you need to be able to set up a StashCache. Don't worry about the details for that, I'm just going to show it. So I can say like install app. And the first thing that SLATE's going to do is ask me, okay, which group do you want to, under which do you want to install this application? So for this purpose, I'll say that I want to do this under the group SLATE dev. And then it's going to load up some stuff here. Hopefully that won't take too long. And it's going to load the configuration, which is that YAML file like I showed for the Atlas StashCache. This is very similar. You know, for OSG's version of StashCache, you have a lot of the same sort of parameters of feeding in high and low watermarks, all of that sort of stuff, auth files, all that normal X3D stuff. I think basically going to leave this alone. Maybe I'll put a demo here for the instance. And I can say, okay, I want to deploy this at UMich Prod, which is our SLATE cluster that we have at the University of Michigan. And I can just click install here. And the portal is going to turn around and talk to the API on my behalf and ask it to very nicely install this application. And that will chug and do its thing for a few. And all this is happening sort of asynchronously. So some of these things do take a little bit of time because the SLATE portal has to fire off a request to the API. The API has to turn around and talk to the cluster, ask it to install an application. And then that cluster is starting to pull down all the container images and that sort of thing. And so now you get to this instance page. This shows you that you have this instance that I've called StashCache demo, which is now running, on what cluster it's running, for what group it's running under. It gives you some information about the services that it's sort of exposing to the internet. So StashCache supports both HTTP-based access and X-root-D-based access. It shows you what pods are in your application. So a pod is sort of a Kubernetes terminology for a grouping of containers. And then SLATE also exposes some application monitoring stuff. There's nothing here yet because the pod hasn't run yet, but maybe if I refresh the page, it will have decided to start running. So currently it's in pending state because it's queued at the cluster. So once I refreshed it, I now see that the StashCache is running. I can click on that and get some more information. So it's saying stuff like these are event information that it's pulled out of Kubernetes. So it's scheduled a pod. The containers are all ready. The thing is fired up, and it has more details about these events and all of that. And you can see now that monitoring information has sort of immediately started feeding in from the SLATE monitoring that's running on UMich Prod. So you can see that this thing is fired up and it's, for whatever reason, using 40% of the CPU and 40 megabytes of memory, and it hasn't done any network stuff yet, and it's occupying a little bit of disk now, that sort of thing. And then so I can get this URL, and hopefully things will work. I'm going to switch back over to my terminal, and I will try to XRDCP that file. So if I go over here, I think I can say I cheated a little bit and pre-baked some of this in here. So what I'm doing is I've just exported this variable called URL that is the location of StashCache. And in fact, I think I grabbed the wrong address. I want to make sure that I get the HTTP interface. Again. Oops. Oh dear, I really messed this up. I believe that's the HTTP interface. And then I'm just going to curl this, and this is a a file that's exposed through the StashCache Federation and OSG, and hopefully, yeah. So it says hello world, which means that I've successfully sort of navigated through my my cache here. I've asked for a file, and that cache should now have this simple hello world file in it. And so that was pretty easy, right? It was 5 minutes of just clicking some buttons, and now I have a working StashCache. Similarly, in Atlas, there's a little bit of extra information needed for that, but it's sort of a similar workflow, right? If you wanted to deploy an Xcache through SLATE. Similarly, we have a pretty powerful command line, and I've just put together a script to go through and deploy StashCache instances on SLATE clusters that I've sort of set up in various places. So let's maybe look at that script really quickly. So this is a pretty straightforward script. I'll just kind of go through it in the blocks here. Basically, all it's doing is I have a list of clusters here. So the 3 clusters I've chosen for this demo are Utah Prod, which is our SLATE cluster at the University of Utah, SLATE Demo Europe, and SLATE Demo Asia, which are 2 clusters that I stood up on GKE this morning. I believe one's in Finland and one is in Taiwan. And I'm just going to have SLATE go through and run the command line utility to just run the SLATE app install StashCache under SLATE dev for the cluster in my list, and just feed it this configuration file. It's going to go through and do all that, wait a few seconds, and then it's going to go through each cluster, find its URL information, and then try to run that curl command that I just ran there previously. So if everything's happy, it should go through and do all of this. And hopefully I've remembered to properly clean everything up before running the demo again. So yeah, so this demo is going to churn here for a minute or so, and we hopefully will see all the applications installed. So I'll pause again, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them while this is running. Hopefully the no questions mean that it's all making sense and not that everybody is horribly confused. So the demo has finished installing the StashCache application at all of these sites, and so now it's going to wait a few seconds for this to do its thing. Okay, so it's asked this cluster at Utah Prod for this cache data, result hello world, so all that worked. Now it's asking the one, I think, in Europe for the cache data. Again, we get hello world. All this has succeeded. And finally, it's going to ask the cluster in Asia for the same data, and we get a hello world. So, within a minute, we were basically able to deploy a very small global caching network and, be able to cache our hello world files all around the world.